But maybe I should back up and tell you just the story of how it started and why it started.
It's a really unbelievable state of affairs that in a country as rich as ours, that not only should there be homeless children, but that on top of that, there should be hungry children.
This was the late 70s and early 80s when we were beginning to see for the first time in the mass media, in magazines and on TV, pictures of bread lines and hearing of churches opening up their back doors and establishing soup kitchens and shelters in the large metropolitan cities.
Homeless people actually need to be a part of the struggle to end homelessness, and they have lots of resources within themselves to give to that struggle.
Both Gordon and I were involved in a very progressive Episcopal church, St. Michael and All Angels. And the pastor was one of many progressive church leaders in town who were social activists and who were very responsive to the idea that it was time for the churches to be involved in social justice programs, hunger, poverty, programs that would change the lives of people who were on the streets, that was just beginning to show up. So this pastor, Father Fowler, he said religion doesn't really take place in the church, it takes place on the streets. It's engaging people in the process of social change. He encouraged us to start a feeding program, and to do that I contacted all of the other, there were 7 Episcopal churches in town at the time, and I developed a core group of loyal parishioners to start a feeding program. And that was St. Martin's Center that operated on 18th and Stone, right where 5 Points is. It was wonderfully organized. There were 30 different churches involved in it, about almost 1,000 different volunteers. So we got off to a really good start until the neighborhood that is adjacent to the church were nervous about it. They weren't used to the idea of having an organized feeding program for homeless people. They filed a lawsuit. They filed it against the Episcopal Church of Arizona. And since I was running St. Martin's Center, I was the one that I went to court and defended the value of our program, and I had a lot of support from other local parishes that were involved in it. But we lost the lawsuit, and we were ordered to close our doors. And so it was at that point that Gordon and I sat down with some of our friends from the churches and tried to figure out what the best path forward would be at this point, and decided that rather than try and revive that program, we would incorporate into our own nonprofit. It was really out of that Primavera Foundation was born. The Community Food Bank started around that same time. Casa Maria started about the same time. We were there at the beginning of pretty much all of it. For the first several years of Primavera, there was no paid staff. It was just Gordon and me, and we didn't pay ourselves. And it wasn't until we realized how overwhelming this was going to be that we decided to start raising money to hire a staff. We started and kind of maintained our commitment to real grassroots development, hiring professional staff as we needed it. We've been responsive to the needs as they've arisen. We've learned about them. We went back to the same folks that had been so involved with us all the way through. They were happy to get back into it and join us in whatever we were going to do next. We're going to work closely with some of these people that we'd gotten to know so well. And what it led to was our first program, which was the men's shelter. This was 1983, when there was a growing interest in programs to help people on the streets. We didn't have a protocol. We didn't have a history. What we were noticing was how many people were newly homeless. And that was the result of a lot of changes that had happened in the 1980s with the Reagan presidency, the shift in priorities for funding nationally, and at the same time that a lot of factories were closing, mines were closing. There was just a real change in the whole nature of employment in this country. So we had a kind of built-in network of support who encouraged us to apply for this grant for Hands Across America. They came through with all the funding we needed to build the men's shelter. Well, what happened is the men's shelter was an instant success in terms of meeting the needs of people who really needed to get off the street, who had real emergency needs. We decided to focus on the men because they were 80% of the homeless people at that time were men. Now there are more women homeless than there used to be, but it's still predominantly men. We noticed two things. One is that we needed to partner with other organizations that were focused on women, focused on mental health, and other needs. And the second thing that we learned was that people who successfully completed their time in the emergency shelter had really no options. But there were no transitional housing units available for people. So we addressed that. There was some federal money available for us to move to the next level, which was to create transitional housing. And the first one we did is where that 5 Points intersection is. And it was called 5 Points. And we had started off with it being men, and then we opened it up to families. So we had men and women there. That's where we learned how to serve that population in a more targeted way. And that has led, to many housing projects that we've developed since, but that was the first one. And now it's become way more complicated. We have entire families that are evicted and have nowhere to go. Newly arrived people from other countries who are here needing housing. It's a matter, I think, for us of just maintaining our connectedness with wherever the needs are. Because we started off at a time when there was a lot of receptivity to social change, we just kind of kept that momentum going. And now I've been retired from it actively for a number of years, but I'm still a volunteer, still very proud of the work that they do. I think that it has sustained over these years and grown in a way that really seems to have affected the community in a positive way.